This episode of Genre Vision is brought to you by our premium subscribers at patreon.com/genrevision. For $5 a month, our premium subscribers get access to an ever-growing library of exclusive bonus content, including weekly pre-show recordings, peeks behind the scenes, and a big currently consuming session every month. Sign up at patreon.com/genrevision.
Greetings, loyal listeners and new recruits. I'm Drew Deach.
I'm Travis Newton.
And this is Genre Vision. Every week, Travis and I review and recommend horror films, action movies, fantasy flicks, sci-fi cinema, and more. And we are concluding Childhood Nightmares Month with a double feature that you may not have expected. It's a Goofy movie and Rover Dangerfield. Before we do that, if you like what we're doing here on Genre Vision, please go to the Apple Podcast Store and rate and review the show. It's really the thing that's going to help us out the most right now. We've been asking for it for a while, and we've gotten some new reviews in, and we want to thank everybody who has submitted reviews. If you do submit a review, we will feature it here on the show. Because, man, being totally honest with y'all, we need them.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't review the show, you go to hell before you die.
You can't drop that on, but they don't know. They don't know you're.
They can just Google "Go to Hell Before You Die" and they'll find out exactly what I'm talking about. But I think I broke Drew.
You can't break me this early. We gotta get through 2 movies.
That's okay. That's okay. We can do it. I believe in you. Okay.
Well, okay. So that's all the call. That's all the calls to action for this week. Let's talk about a Goofy movie. So, oh man, let's talk about a Goofy movie, because I think we have to give a little bit of a genesis of this. You know, we're doing Childhood Nightmares Month, and we've constructed, I think, a pretty nice sampling of movies. But part of this was that we had talked about doing our other movie, Rover Dangerfield, a long, long time ago. And then we also got on the subject of a Goofy movie one time when Travis started sending me clips, like, of just stills from different animation cells in this movie. And
well, I mean, even before that, like, you had seen, back when you were living in Los Angeles, you went and saw this at the El Capitan Theater, which is the big Disney-owned theater there. And, you know, it was a hell of a production they put on for this movie, which I thought was a pretty minor work that millennials like to talk about. It was at that point that I started to revisit some materials from the movie and, like, try to reevaluate it, because I did see this in the theaters as a kid, and I probably did see it on home video subsequently, but I really didn't have a great solid idea of what the experience of the movie was like. But the more I found out about it, the stranger the movie seemed to me, because, like, we all know just how fucked up and broken and stupid movie logic is, right? Movies operate on this strange, you know, fantasy wavelength that we all accept. But the logic, and not just like the cartoon physics logic of this movie, but the logic of just how this world works in Goofy movie seemed so impenetrable and so strange to me. Like, the more we dissected it, the weirder and weirder it got. And I realized, like, yes, there is a level of, like, over analysis I can do on this movie, but a Goofy movie, just looking at the way it works as a story, is pretty strange.
Yeah, it's fascinating. This, as a Disney production, I know this was done by what was essentially their TV division. I think the studio was called, like, Disney Toon or something.
It was animated by a whole bunch of different Disney animation teams around the world, but not like its standard, like, film production division.
Oh, right. It didn't fall under the Walt Disney Animation Studios banner.
Right. It was produced by what they call Disney Movie Toons and Walt Disney Television Animation.
Yes. And from what I understand, this was a spinoff of the television show Goof Troop,
which I've never seen.
I mean, I remembered it vaguely, but I had always been under the assumption that it was the other. I thought a Goofy movie came first, and then there was the TV show. Apparently, I was wrong for many, many years. And having no knowledge or attachment to the show Goof Troop, I also saw this in the theater when it came out. And I remember liking it as a kid and having it on home video and watching it many times over, and going to that screening at the El Capitan. And I think a Goofy movie has kind of endured, for one, like you say, there is a millennial nostalgia element to it. But I think it's endured because, especially considering this movie comes out during a period where Disney Animation was doing really good, this is a really unique movie when you look at it in the Disney canon. But even outside of that, it's just a really strong father-son drama in the family movie mold.
It is, but the kind of reality it constructs in order to make that effective father-son drama is like this, Westworld season 1 labyrinth of like how far you can go down the hole. It's like, okay, Goofy is a dad. Sure. This is something that's actually been long established in the sort of Disney animated characters canon. Mm-hmm. There was like a Goofy Jr. that was then, subsequently renamed as Max for later iterations. So we're presented with this version of a world in which the default person is this anthropomorphic dog. Everybody's a Goofy, basically. So Goofy is a single dad of a teenage goof. Mm-hmm. And he never talks about this kid's mom. So the assumption, because it's something's like unsaid, it's like, okay, this is a pain too deep to even bear mentioning. So immediately the assumption is like, this is a dead mom.
It's Disney.
I've talked to several people about this, and this is just the assumption that I feel like everybody's operating under.
Well, this is Disney. They have a history of dead parents in general.
Sure.
So that would track. I don't know if there's any lore that carries over from the Goof Troop show, because I think Max's best friend PJ, I think he had a mom. Like Pete had a wife in the show, I believe.
Evidently in the show that was a thing, but
she's also nowhere here.
Yeah, in the movie it's just like a boy and his dad as Goofy, and then Pete has, the boy and his dad thing, and that's really just done as a thematic parallel. So it's like, okay, Goofy fucked at one point, and this is the product of that. And the Goofy Jr., now Max, is in high school and is now at the age where, like, I guess Max is looking for a masculine role model and sees that in this celebrity, this singer called Powerline. And you get these ideas that like Max is looking for big masculine role models because like there are posters on Max's walls of like really buff Goofy dudes, which is fucked up. And then Goofy busts into his room wearing a towel and a towel turban, like vacuuming, like doing like domestic,
very feminine
chores, which is fine for anybody. It's not an inherently feminine thing.
Yeah, but it's supposed to imply a general femininity as far as people will read when you see that kind of imagery.
Not necessarily a femininity, but sort of an atypical model of masculinity for Max, because Goofy is a single dad. He's had to take on these other duties that maybe he would not under sort of the stereotypical highly sexist sort of division of labor in heterosexual relationships, right? Okay, already we're way down the fucking rabbit hole on this, but the movie is directly stating that like, okay, Goofy is not the kind of masculine role model that this teenage boy wants because he's not like stereotypically masculine.
Well, and here's the thing, this is all made very, very clear in something I can't believe we didn't open the discussion with, which is Max's opening dream sequence.
Oh, man.
Like, let's just talk about this.
Just the opening image of, like, the waving wheat field. Of course, my trash brain is going to start singing the opening song from Oklahoma immediately. But I think before you ever see Max on screen, you see a waving wheat field, which is already sort of a kind of abstract and disconnected image for something like this. And you hear this very sexy voice calling Max, and we're introduced to the romantic object really of this movie. She's barely a character, named Roxanne, and it's this goofy girl that Max has a crush on at school,
who is in the dream is wearing a flowing dress and is literally up on a pedestal.
The fact that like he's having dreams about this girl in this way is already sort of unsettling. Like the dream logic of this, it puts us in a strange headspace right off the bat. Then the movie gets directly into body horror.
Yes, there is a were goofing in which Max suddenly starts to be, grow into his body to look more like his dad, like Goofy.
He grows through sudden goofberty.
Yes, there's I think even a close up of his hand where his fingers are getting longer, and so it's like, this is terrifying. And then of course the most horrible thing is when he tries to speak and all that he can do is do the Goofy and that's what wakes Max up from his nightmare. If it's not like, the movie makes its thematic mission statement in the opening with this dream sequence. Max really likes this girl and wants to obtain her from her pedestal, but he is afraid of turning into his father. Boom.
The mission statement in the movie is being goofy equals horror. The plot setup of this is not something that I want to spend a whole lot of time on, but
no, it's a road movie.
It's a road movie. Max tries to get this chick to fall for him, and there's like a bit of an agreement. It's like, hey, let's acknowledge that we both have some feelings for each other, and let's arrange some sort of romantic meeting. But before that can be delivered on in the plot, Goofy has this revelation that if he doesn't take charge in the relationship with his son, then his son is at risk for being a delinquent, basically, because Max does get in trouble at school. Before you know it, they are on the open road, and the movie reveals itself to be an actual musical. Like, there is a song featured earlier, but it's not diegetically kind of positioned. Well, actually, no, there is a Welcome to Our World song. I misspoke.
Yes.
There is a Welcome to the World song, which is actually a pretty decent song.
It is. I like that song.
But they're on the open road, and then the open road song's pretty decent. Like, as a musical, it's not bad. There's just not a lot of songs in it.
No, there's one musical dud, I think.
Yes.
But no, I think the songs are very good. This is, I think what's fun about this, and it's probably not as notable today, but I think for when it was released, it's worth taking into account that this is a movie that plays kind of fast and loose with meta references about Disney itself. When Max wakes up from his nightmare, he has a phone on his bedside table and it's ringing, and it's a Mickey Mouse phone. Mm-hmm. And it's like, okay. Later during the open road song, we see Mickey and Donald on the side of the road hitchhiking. Max makes references to Donald Duck being a friend of Goofy's. They play 20 questions, and the person they're always thinking of, or that they mention, is Walt Disney. There's a Disney logo keychain on the keys to the car. This movie is kind of cavalier with the Disney brand in a way that at times for a Disney movie feels genuinely subversive.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely reverent of the brand in a way that it appreciates, like, oh, people will like Mickey, or they'll appreciate, this cameo from Mickey. But for the actual characters to sit around and mention Walt Disney's name as a joke, as if Walt Disney, like, just invoking the name would be a joke in and of itself, seems almost sacrilegious for this brand. It's odd. But the most sacrilegious thing is they go to a theme park and they lampoon the Country Bear Jamboree from Disney World as this like redneck possum hoedown bullshit with, like Chuck E. Cheese horror characters, total Five Nights at Freddy's.
Well, and the audience that's there, because it's all from Max's perspective, so everything he's seeing is horrifying and awful.
Oh, it's all a bunch of like deranged, like Texas Chainsaw rednecks.
Yeah, so there's like a little girl next to him smiling. Like when they cut to her and she's just clapping and staring at Max, smiling and just going, yeah, 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 yeah. I'm like, this is fantastic.
Yeah. Well, this is a section of the movie that is almost purely social horror. Not only is Max experiencing this like skin crawling, like get me out of this kind of situation feeling that I think the movie expresses really, really well. After this, he is humiliated in front of all these people. Like his dad is like trying to do this like mandatory fun thing because his father feels like he's losing control of the relationship and is in some ways trying to reassert a sort of lost masculinity. Like, Goofy's trying to reassert control in this relationship between father and son is still caught up on some sort of toxic ideas, some of which he gets from Pete. But this culminates in this moment of rather extreme social horror, like this humiliation, which is very easy for teenagers. Like, we have to admit in retrospect that teenagers are humiliated very easily, particularly by their parents. But the movie is sincere and good enough at portraying these things to actually make that humiliation feel palpable. But also, I think it does a really great job of making Goofy's perspective as a dad who's trying to genuinely win back his son's affection palpable as well. So it's not only a good example of social horror, but it's also genuinely kind of sad. This is the mid-turning point of the movie where like the tone kind of goes dark.
Yes, I think all the heartfelt moments in the movie work. There's to add to the other horror categories. We get creature horror when Bigfoot becomes a character.
Yeah, Bigfoot just shows up. Surprise, surprise.
Yes.
There is a sequence where just the literal Sasquatch comes out of the fucking woods and terrorizes them for like 10 minutes.
Yes, and has some cute jokes where he's listening to, Staying Alive and dancing and all this kind of fun stuff, is putting on a puppet show for them. And it's voiced by Frank Welker.
That was a genuine laugh for me. Like the puppet show moment where it's like, this is the one way Sasquatch can think of to like torture them the worst, is to put on a stupid puppet show for them. That I found like genuinely funny. Like I had a few really solid laughs in the movie.
No, yeah, I think there's some good humor there. But this entire setup where they're trapped in the car just waiting out Sasquatch leads to the first really great heartfelt moment for me in the Hi Dad Soup moment, in which there's a memory that Goofy shares about, oh yeah, when you were a kid, Max, you would spell things out in your alphabet soup. And even that is such a, that scene is so crazy to me because Goofy has to use the cigarette lighter in the car to heat up the can of soup. And he has to say, well, at least this thing's good for something.
Yeah, that detail is so out of place in a Disney movie, and the mundanity of it is so strange, and so earnest. It was just like, that was one of the few details I remembered really, really vividly from watching it as a kid. It was like he used his cigarette lighter to heat up a can of soup, and that detail sticks out as so odd that it couldn't help but like kind of sear itself into my brain. Also, Bigfoot is like trying to kill them, I think.
Yes, he's also trying to kill them.
There's like a real like creature horror moment. Maybe he wants the can of soup. I don't know. But there is this creature horror moment where the can of soup sort of bounces out of the car and Goofy is trying to get it and his arm is out the window that's partially rolled down and he's trying to get the can of soup back through the partially rolled down window and can't get it. I'm like, oh, this is like Jurassic Park. Like this is the raptors in the kitchen. Like Bigfoot's trying to tear your arm off and you can't get the can of soup through the window. And it's funny, but it's also like actual creature horror comedy. Like,
no, yeah, that all works. But I upon this rewatch, we were doing this for Childhood Nightmares Month, and all of this horror stuff is potent. But the thing that really hit for me this time around was that this is just a really good drama. The escalation of the conflict, like you say, this is pretty mundane in terms of what it's depicting, but it takes the emotional severity of this story happening between a father and a son 100% seriously. And there are so many great decisions, like when Max is tempted to change the map, the route on his dad's map, and it opens up and there's the scene is only lit from the light inside of the glove compartment box.
Yeah.
And then magically a pencil just rolls out in front of him. It's kind of spooky.
No, it's really well staged. And for the most part, the movie, even though it wasn't handled by the sort of usual Disney theatrical release animators, it's like, yeah, it looks pretty good. There are quite a few really good looking backgrounds in the movie. Mm-hmm. And, the actual keyframe animation looks pretty decent. Although it doesn't look like a standard Disney theatrical release at all.
I like the way they quote lit the movie in a lot of scenes because their choices for creating kind of dynamic lighting patterns always stick out for me. Like when they're staying at that Neptune motel and Goofy
Sign
and
me
Pete.
up.
Oh yeah. I mean, I love that. But the scene with Goofy and Pete in the hot tub where they're colored kind of blue, so it looks like they're being lit from this blue light underneath them.
Can we talk about that scene just for one shot? And that's the shot of Pete in his Speedo. The shot is under the water, so the camera is under the water looking up at Pete's like huge hairy body in a, I don't know, horrifyingly sexy pose.
I like that, horrifyingly sexy.
I don't know why he's posing like that in the moment, but I mean, like the movie wants us to feel awkward about it, but like looking at it, it's like, oh, the movie knows what it's doing. and that's scary. Also, Goofy's body is somewhat of a horror as well, because you see Goofy damn near naked in this movie, and it's just it's just like looking at Goofy's bare feet outside of the giant clown shoes is like, whoa, okay, all right.
Can we talk about the personal horror of the moment during the father-son bonding song, which is the worst song in the movie? It's not a terrible song, it's just not good.
It's also one of the more trite emotional beats that's totally unearned.
Yes. But in that moment, Max takes his shoes off and sticks his feet in a river, and a fish comes and latches onto his big toe. That image of seeing a goof's foot and having a fish on top, I don't know, there's something really disturbing to me.
It's like Mickey taking off his gloves. Like, what the fuck?
Right, exactly.
I've never seen Mickey's fingernails. Mickey doesn't have fingernails. I don't want Mickey to have fingernails. It's too real. It's too real, man.
In the opening scene, when Max wakes up from his nightmare, he jumps up into camera and then he pats his face for a second, and he has the gloves on, the Disney gloves. And it's like, oh, they sleep with those things on. Good. Those are their hands. Like,
yes, those are their hands. No other goofs in the movie, I think. Maybe Pete and PJ have the gloves on.
I think so.
But I know like the rest, almost everybody else at the school doesn't have the gloves on. Mm-hmm. Roxanne definitely doesn't have the gloves on because evidently gloves are not sexy in Goof World.
No, but no, I think the father-son drama, the moment that really clicked for me this time is they're having a fight because Goofy knows that Max has deceived him, and during this fight, their car rolls away from them. And so while they're running and chasing the car, they're also arguing back and forth about each other and having, more issues, and more things are going wrong in that scene. And they eventually end up plunged to the river. I love having them have this go. This is their big confrontation in the movie.
The argument is good. Like, the nugget of the argument is Max saying, I have this life now that is separate from you. And Goofy's argument is, I just want to be a part of your life. Like, whatever it is now, I just want to be a part of it.
That's the line, is that,
and it's incredibly sincere and very, very heartfelt and very true. Looking back on it, I empathize way more with Goofy than I do with Max.
Sure.
Max generally is a shithead in the movie and doesn't deserve what he ends up getting as the protagonist of the film. But no matter how good the delivery on the emotional beats is, nothing can shake kind of the general weirdness of this movie for me. And maybe the general weirdness is just incorporated as part of the overall fabric of it. Like, I appreciate the movie more for just how brazenly strange it is. And somehow it manages to pair that strangeness off with a surprising sincerity that works, like is more than functional.
I agree. And I think that there's so many fun kind of rabbit holes that you can go down with the Goofy universe. It's like when people talk about the Cars movies and they're like the universe. It's like, well, wait a minute, the world that these things live in. Like, as soon as you think about it for even a second, it starts to kind of wrinkle your brain. And because like when we were talking about them mentioning Walt Disney, I'm like, oh, so that means there's a Goofy-fied version of Walt Disney in this universe who established the Disney company. Like, and so like all those kind of things in this.
Also, Mickey Mouse is hitching a ride.
Yes, but
he's enough of a celebrity to be a telephone, but he's also a hobo.
Yes,
so
he's also
do with that what you will.
Yes, and those rabbit holes are fun just to kind of, for making fun conversation. But I think as a movie, a Goofy movie really wins with the heart that it goes for. But the horror elements are definitely there, and I think extremely effective. But switching gears to our other film, Rover Dangerfield, this is a movie that from the outset, if Goofy movie opened with a nightmare sequence, but it kind of lulled you into it with some, false sense of security with the Terrence Malick wheat fields and everything. Rover Dangerfield opens in an extremely eerie manner. We see the title is a neon sign in the sky. There's this kind of very light jazz theme going on, and we find out that it's the middle of the night. There's wolves howling, and we're in the desert.
Yeah.
And this shot is a big CG animated shot with some cell animation stuff. blended in, that is doing this huge camera push into what we eventually see is Las Vegas. But
I mean, this is the money shot of the movie, and they blew it on the first shot.
They did. We should mention that this was distributed by Warner Brothers, but it was produced by Hyperion, who also did The Brave Little Toaster, which we covered earlier this month.
Which also we didn't know until we watched this movie.
No, and Rover Dangerfield is a movie that I had recorded on some VHS, potentially even on the same recorded VHS that I had The Brave Little Toaster. And it's a movie that I always remembered. Like the title just obviously stuck out, especially once I learned who Rodney Dangerfield was and everything. But I remember it's like, yeah, I remember that movie being kind of weird. Like, and I couldn't really place my finger on it. The genesis of this movie is very interesting in that it was originally supposed to be an adult targeted piece of animation with Rodney Dangerfield creating a character and everything around his shtick. And somehow eventually it turned into a G-rated experience. But even so, I feel like there's potentially a lot of remnants from when it was supposed to be an adult targeted thing, because there's some really extremely dark storytelling decisions made in this movie.
There are. This was released in 1991, and it's kind of timeless. It feels like a timeless 90s movie. I'm actually kind of surprised that it was so early in the 90s, because this could have been 96, 97. You know, Dangerfield didn't pass away until 04, but it's timeless because it's kind of removed from a lot of pop culture that isn't related to what we think about as classic Vegas. Otherwise, it's like On the Farm, could be fucking any time. It could be any time as long as there are cars.
Sure. So the story here is that Rover Dangerfield, I don't know if he's ever called Rover Dangerfield. He's just Rover in the movie. He lives up his life in Las Vegas. He's owned by a working showgirl there called Connie. And as he says, it's a dog's life, and I love it. Las Vegas is the place for me.
He plays dog poker with his dog buddies in the alley.
Yes, they play dog craps, and a different kind of dog craps, but
Heyo.
Heyo, that one. Hey, come on. Hey.
Put on a comedy routine here.
So
we have to mention like just how odd this is as a comedy, because Dangerfield has a number of credits on the movie. Not only does he play the main character is modeled after him physically, down to the belly button.
Which means you have this animated dog whose eyes are doing a chameleon thing a lot of the times, where they're staring, in different directions.
It's hideous to look at. Anyway, but screenplay by Rodney Dangerfield. Story by Rodney Dangerfield. And Harold Ramis? Songs by... it's 2 credits, but one of them is Rodney Dangerfield. I forget the other one. This has Dangerfield all over it. And what's so strange about it is because his character is such a direct translation of him into dog form. His character cracks jokes nonstop to the other dogs, and the other dogs are just constantly cracking up. Oh, you're so funny, Rover.
The Las Vegas dogs, yeah, they just they love
it. For the movie to constantly point out how funny the main character is, makes the movie so much less funny.
Well, this is part of this is such a bizarre vanity project.
Yes.
And vanity projects are always interesting, and usually they're not very good movies, but they end up being very fascinating and intriguing to talk about.
The Fanatic, anyone?
Yes. With Rover Dangerfield, this is part of it where it's like Rodney Dangerfield wanted to be in a movie where he's playing a dog version of himself, where he does his shtick and cracks jokes, and everybody just thinks he's the greatest. Like, it's such a bizarre vanity choice.
I mean, Neil Breen AF, in a Neil Breen movie, he's just the most unresistible man.
Right. So it makes sense that, for a comedian, that their vanity project would be about everybody finding them really funny. But you also mentioned songs by Rodney Dangerfield, and it's not just that the songs are by Rodney Dangerfield. It's that he is the only person singing songs in character throughout the entire movie.
Yeah. There are, I forget, I think maybe four or five musical numbers in this movie, and he sings them all. Now, luckily, like, Dangerfield could actually carry a tune. Like, he wasn't a Broadway caliber singer, but the guy could carry a tune. Yeah. And, you know, that it totally works for a kid's movie starring Rodney Dangerfield. It's fine. The songs aren't anything special. In fact, some of the songs are downright assault upon my eardrums. There's one song about not pissing on Christmas trees, and I'm not lying. This is literally what the song is about.
It is this big interlude in the middle of the movie in which the family, we can't jump immediately to the Christmas tree pissing
I know
song.
it's something I want to eternal sunshine that from my brain if I could.
Because what happens is that Rover and his little dog buddy Eddie go out and they see Connie's boyfriend Rocky is trying to do some kind of scam deal where he's given some mafiosos some like junk jewelry or something.
He's a criminal scumbag just generally.
Yeah. I mean, and as you said, he looks like a Sin City character.
Yeah, he kind of looks like Clive Owen's character in Sin City, but he also acts like Benicio del Toro's character in Sin City. But bizarrely, he also looks like a lot of characters in like the main movie I thought of was Titan AE. He looks like the human designs from Titan AE, but it's a lot more extreme. And because it was animated by Hyperion, they all have like brave toaster eyes. They all look like the fucking toaster. It's crazy.
And Rocky, for reasons that don't really matter, Rover spoils one of these scam deals that Rocky does. And then Connie has to go away for some reason, and Rocky is going to dog sit Rover. And during this time, he has decided that he's going to murder Rover. He grabs him in a shot that I cannot believe. I mean, this is why it was made by Warner Brothers. So you can't put this in a Disney movie. He grabs the dog and slams him down onto the floor out of frame. But man, the way they animate that, it's like, whoa, this hurts. And this is after he's like leapt across the apartment to grab at Rover.
Yeah. The animation quality in this shot, you know, is actually really remarkable. You know, the expressions are really extreme. The detail in the hands is really extreme and weird. Like it's the animation is really distinctly stylized as, you know, something that doesn't feel Disney beautiful. It's ugly in a really fascinating way. And for the most part, like the humans all are very, very ugly in a fascinating way.
Well, like Brave Little Toaster that we talked about, these kind of productions, one of the things about Disney animated features is that there is always a consistent level of model quality in their designs in their movies. Like things are never going to look too off model.
Sure.
Whereas with Brave Little Toaster in this, it's very clear at times like, okay, this was boarded by somebody, you know, the storyboards on this were done by a different team or a different head, and there are design choices here that don't link up with the model that we see in other shots of Rover. Like, for example, they give Rover a belly button indent, which is so strange, but clearly it appears and disappears at will. So that, you know, it was whatever. It's like, okay, these people didn't put the belly button in when they were working on this one. So this is all to say that the animation quality of the film fluctuates noticeably, which, you know, a lot of people I don't think are used to when they watch it, you know, because they watch a lot of Disney features where they have that consistent level of quality. But so Rocky knocks Rover out and then drives him to Hoover Dam, places him in a sack, and throws him off of Hoover Dam. And in this moment, there is a filmmaking language decision made, which totally, if you were just watching the movie and not knowing anything about it, you would think they have just killed this dog.
For sure. They put this dog in a sack, and, well, I should say Rocky puts this dog. Why did they not call him Rocco? I keep wanting to call him Rocco. Rocky puts this dog in a sack, ties the sack up, takes it, chucks it off the Hoover Dam. We see the sack is not like moving and struggling. We don't hear Rover going, "Please help me," you know.
Hey, get me out of here.
This fucking sucks. I'm drowning, literally. None of that. The sack is motionless. It hits the water. It sinks. And we fade to black. Ladies and gents, and whomever else may be listening, that dog dead.
As far as filmmaking language has taught me, that means this dog is dead. And the rest of the movie, this is his death dream. There's certainly a YouTube theory video that could come out of that. But the point being that Rover Dangerfield, it engages in a lot of darker setups and images that you don't normally see in fare from certain animation studios, particularly Disney. Like Disney has some pretty hard and fast rules of things they wouldn't show or do. Mm-hmm. And after a point, depending on the regime that's there at the time. And Rover Dangerfield, clearly being that this was distributed by Warner Brothers and produced by Hyperion, they were allowed to do some things that I think probably don't seem that shocking, but when you think about it in the landscape of other animation, is pretty shocking. For example, there are multiple times in this movie where a shotgun is fired, sometimes at Rover.
Oh yeah, and going back to the sort of tradition of Warner Brothers animation, like Looney Tunes, those motherfuckers were always trying to blow each other's head off.
Yes.
And naturally, like, they never succeeded. That was the rules of Looney Tunes destruction. Like, violence in Looney Tunes, like, yes, you can turn Daffy Duck's beak around to the wrong side of his head, but you can't decapitate the poor fucker. And so it's things like, if Rover Dangerfield is chasing a chicken because he doesn't like the chicken, you can fire a shotgun point blank at Rover Dangerfield, and you can't shoot the dog. He can, however, move his Dangerfield-shaped bulk to accommodate the shotgun blast. However, his tie is going to be turned into a piece of Swiss cheese. By the next scene, the tie will regenerate because that's just the kind of cartoon logic we're dealing with here, and that's fine. That's not a problem. That's just how cartoons work. But the fact that this movie is willing to fire a shotgun, to have a human character whom the movie argues is actually worthy of saving, to have that character openly think that it's okay to fire a shotgun, double barrels, kaboom, point blank at this character is like, whoa. Oh my God.
Especially because what happens is that Rover's bag is picked up by some people, and they either revive him or, he didn't quite die or something. And he's
dead, Drew. He's dead. This is a death.
Yes,
dream.
well, he is dead, but he makes his way to this farm, and he's now going to be living the farm life. And the father figure on this farm has some open contempt for Rover. It's like, oh, it looks, he's a city dog, he's fat, he's lazy, and of course the farm son, whatever his name is,
Johnny Farmson.
Yes, farm boy is just like, can we keep him, Dad? Can we keep him? And Rover, is trying to get acclimated to farm life in quote comedic unquote ways. These parts of the movie, like this all stinks. There's a romantic figure that they create, this other dog, Daisy, who is an absolute nothing character.
I mean, the movie conjures her so suddenly, and immediately Rover is singing a song to declare his undying love for her. It's like, what? Who? Why? And she has no personality other than to be completely and utterly devoted to him and to be very, very nice to him. Like, it sucks so much. It's barely a character. Evidently, Daisy was given her own musical number. It's in the credits. The voice actress who sings and says Daisy's part is singing it in the credits, but not until they finish their musical rendition of the Christmas Tree Piss song.
Yes, I mean during Rover's time on the farm. He gets acclimated. He falls in love instantly with this Daisy character.
Total fucking nobody, nothing garbage.
And at some point winter has come and they're riding on sleds and they're going to go out and chop down a Christmas tree. And, Rover Mays is like, hey, I know everything about trees. That's where I do my business. Hey. But Daisy, is like, oh, Rover, no, please don't. As Rover runs over to a tree and sniffs it and is wagging his tail and is about to put his leg up, he's just like, hey, I know what the score is. And then he has this song where he's like, I'll never do it on a Christmas tree. And it's like, oh my God.
The length of this song is obscene. It should be one joke where she's like, Rover, we don't do it on Christmas trees because of our love for the good Lord Savior Jesus Christ.
Yes.
And he's like, sure, honey. End joke. It's not even a joke, actually. And scene. There's no way to further improv that. It's done. But to turn it into a 3-minute song is like... you remember the Pain Olympics?
Well, there is, I don't know if I'd call it bright spots, but at least some interesting spots as the movie continues, because Rover, he's like, you know what, I want to have this life here, and I'm going to be a farm dog, and I'm really going to do well. And there's this turkey that has arrived on the farm,
and they make a ton of dark jokes about her being eaten.
Yes, and then some wolves show up and are trying to raid the chicken coop and trying to get the turkey, and Rover's trying to chase them away. And amidst all this, eventually, Cal, that's Farm Dad's name, Cal is able to come out and, shoots his gun, and the wolves scatter. And Rover's like, he grabs the turkey and is all, hey, we did it. We're okay. And the turkey is dead, which is identified by its shocked expression on its face and the fact that its neck is completely limp.
Mm-hmm. And general gray coloration. Yeah. A very, very dead turkey. And they proceed to stretch this joke out past, the point of comfort.
Yes, this movie has corpse humor.
Sure.
Turkey corpse humor. But Cal catches this and seems to believe that, Rover's the one who killed the turkey. And it's in this moment where there's a conversation where Cal is having with Farm Son and is like, well, tomorrow morning I'm going to have to take him out and
blast that fucker's brains out,
Yes, this is so there's a whole big sequence in this movie. Yes, that's what he says later to Rover. He's like, I don't want to do this, but you've taken a life. I'm just like, Jesus Christ.
It was at this point where I sent you a message. You and I had the privilege of watching this together, and I said, why is this dark? I mean, this is just why are we doing this? This is like the jokey Rodney Dangerfield dog movie. Why are we going down this dark alleyway right now?
And it's so dark.
Particularly because at the midpoint of the movie, Rover Dangerfield has found himself on the farm. He's fallen in love. It's Christmas time. Everybody's happy, buddy. That's the end of the movie. We've reached a resolution. He's comfortable in Las Vegas. He gets booted out of Las Vegas. He finds himself in a new place and has to get acclimated to it. But eventually he does, and that's a happy ending, and yay. And then it's sequel territory immediately. It's okay, this is a Rover Dangerfield Christmas. And then his owner is literally about to blow his brains out in the woods. Fucking what?
Yes, this entire ongoing sequence where Rover's being taken off of the farm and, he's like, no, I don't want to go. I'm too young. All that.
Imagine being 4.
I can.
And watching this fucking scene where this guy's like,
I saw this
I'm literally going to take this dog out and shoot it. I mean, Old Yeller was enough.
Well, this one's great. I mean, they just drag it out because they have Rover and he ties him over, puts him over on next to a tree, and Cal is saying stuff. It's I don't want to do this, but you've taken a life. I'm sorry, Rover. And then we have shots where we're looking down the barrel of the gun, and Rover's this tiny little figure in the frame, lining up with the barrel, and he's shivering because he's so scared. I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah, it's fucked. Totally fucked.
But then the wolves show up and try and kill Cal, and Rover fights him off. And so, he doesn't get his brains blown out.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Tries to save the guy who just tried to blow his brains out. Yeah, okay.
And because of this, he gets in the paper as a hero dog for some reason. This is seen And I'm just telling you what happened.
I love that local newspaper had like nothing else bigger to write on, like hero dog saves man from wolves. It's like, okay.
Yes. This is seen in Las Vegas by his owner, Connie. She comes and gets him back from the farm. You know, this means that he's not going to live out his life with Daisy. So he goes back to Las Vegas, and he's not.
By the way,
happy.
He like jumps for joy when he finds out that Connie's going to come collect him and take him away from his country life, and that his lover, you know, who at this point he's already shagged.
Well, yeah, we're going to get to that. The proof of the shagging. Mm-hmm. Rover goes back to Las Vegas, runs into Rocky and attacks Rocky. Rocky tries to escape from Rover. He escapes into a limo that is being run by the mob guys that he ripped off, and they tell him that they're going to take him to Hoover Dam, implying that they're going to murder him. And the reaction that Rover has at this is to go like, "Bye, Rocky. We'll miss you."
Wouldn't it be more like, I don't know, poetically correct if Rover himself were to push Rocky off the fucking
Rover's got it.
You deserve it, you son of a bitch.
I just had an image in my mind of Rover and Rocky doing the scene from Miller's Crossing. You know? He's just, look inside your heart, Rover. That really tickled me. But yeah, so then Rover, he's bummed being in Las Vegas because he wants to go back on the farm and be with Daisy. So he goes back on the farm and decides to live there instead. And it is revealed then that Daisy has given birth to a bunch of mutants. The boys look like Rover, and the girls look like her.
Miss Piggy. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, yes, it's a current Miss Piggy situation. And even one of the babies is like, "Hey, I'm walking here," or something. They pitch Roddy.
One of them is literally Dustin Hoffman from Midnight Cowboy. Thank you. Yeah, that's how that works. Anyway, yeah, this is a 74-minute movie. With an admittedly long credit sequence, right? Like, so they get through the full instrumental rendition of Christmas Tree Piss Song, the full deleted Daisy song, which is about how much she loves Rover.
Yeah, and how he's amazing and
fucking
perfect and
barf. And then there's a full, like, you know, scrolling credits after like the feature opening credits. So it's a long credit sequence. All this adds up to 74 minutes. It feels like 98. It's not a good movie. And I looked at your rating on Letterboxd. You cut this movie way more slack than I do. This is not a good movie, Drew.
Well, I feel similarly about Brave Little Toaster in that there are things I think that are so memorable from Rover Dangerfield. There's things that we didn't even talk about. For example, when Rover wakes up the following morning after partying and he's hungover essentially. And there's these interesting perspective things where the entire room is waving about him and has to form itself. There's interesting stuff in this movie, and I find this movie so fascinating as a vanity project. It's such a very weird, specific kind of vanity project. Like the fact that it had to be animated, that the lead character... It's not, you know, we were talking earlier about potential shelf picks for this, and you had mentioned the Adam Sandler movie, 8 Crazy Nights. And in that movie, Sandler is basically playing an animated version of himself, and that it is drawn to be like a human that looks like Adam Sandler. He voices some other, you know, more exaggerated characters, but he has a human version of himself. In Rover Dangerfield, it's not like they just made a cartoon Rodney Dangerfield. It had to be a dog version of him. He specifically wanted to be a dog. There's just so many bizarre, weird kind of side the norm decisions in Rover Dangerfield that I can't help but find it interesting, and sometimes horrifying. Like there are so many great stills from this that we took that are just terrifying expressions on Rover's face.
Oh, the way that Rover is animated, and it's in like individual frames, and Goofy Movie has a similar thing, where it's like if you pick out an individual frame, like an in-between expression on this dog, it's like, how fucking crazy is this frame of animation that I'm viewing? Like him stretching his mouth really wide, or like his mouth on the wrong side of his face. It's like, what am I looking at? The animation and like how they chose to animate this character is so strange. It's almost like I rather would have like watched the in-between artists work rather than the keyframe artist work, because the in-between of like how they get from one expression to another is generally like way more fascinating when you watch the facial animation of this character.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, our Dogman double feature this week.
Should we ruin it? I mean, like you and I have been throwing around a phrase that I think you and I have used to kind of sum up how these two movies relate, and that's Dogmen cucked by life.
That's what Travis dubbed it. It's interesting. I mean, in that comparison, because we also have to look at this as a Childhood Nightmares double feature. In that arena, it's interesting that the Rover Dangerfield, taking the Rodney Dangerfield shtick of like, hey, I get no respect. It's like, yeah, but you're just kind of a like lazy jerk of a character. Like that's kind of what the Rodney Dangerfield vibe is.
Sure, but all your friends think you're so hilarious.
So there's nothing really endearing at all about that in Rover Dangerfield. Whereas the things that are put upon Goofy and Max, which is oftentimes their clumsiness or their inability to detect when something bad is about to happen to them, that feels more, I don't know, endearing. There's something more cosmically horrendous about their lives that we can all kind of understand.
Bizarrely, they're more human. I mean,
yes.
Actually, I shouldn't say bizarrely. I mean, they are directly more human because they live more human lives. They drive cars. They live in houses. They go to high school. They work shitty jobs. I mean, Goofy working a shitty job in a Goofy movie is like one of the more relatable things now. There's this whole sequence in a Goofy movie that we didn't mention before, but he is like an Olin Mills studio photographer. He is taking crummy portraits of Goofy babies essentially
in the middle of like a Kmart.
Sure. And Pete is this coworker photographer of his who's way worse at the job and way worse with kids. And there's this moment where Goofy is able to get like a sincere smile out of a kid, and it's this like horrifying toothless grin that this thing lets loose, and it's so fascinatingly ugly. But because Goofy is generally quite good with children, in what we see, in order to do that, he actually has to swallow a squeaky toy, which is again horrifying. The man is choking. Please. He actually gets the fuck me eyes from the kid's mom, and I'm not kidding. I'm not exaggerating. Like this kid's mom looks at him like, ooh, somebody's good with kids.
Yeah.
It happens. It happens.
That's all you, buddy. No, yeah, I find Goofy Movie has definitely earned its reputation and has gotten better with age. It stands out in the Disney crowd and just in the animated feature crowd. Rover Dangerfield, it's a curiosity at best, especially if you're interested in celebrity vanity projects.
It's a pretty niche crowd. Admittedly, like both of these movies are weird.
They are.
Quite weird. One of them is endearingly weird. The other isn't.
Well, that's why I want to come around on Childhood Nightmares and the month in general, is that throughout a lot of these, I think something, maybe with the exception of Are You Afraid of the Dark, is that it's not so much about the quality of these things as it was the effectiveness of the things that they were trying to do to elicit horror out of their intended younger audience. Mm-hmm. And I think it's surprising that a lot of that has remained effective. I would say overall the Childhood Nightmares elements of the movies that we did for this month, those elements were all really strong in the things that we chose. And strong, I mean, in terms of vision and in execution. Like they worked really, really well. The stuff in Return to Oz, Peanut Butter Solution, Brave Little Toaster, Are You Afraid of the Dark? And even in these movies, like even Rover Dangerfield, which was the worst movie we watched for this month, has moments that are effectively dark and scary. And sometimes for, reasons like we're going to kill this dog.
Sure. And then there's a lot of it, I think, that maybe for you and I, it's just memorably strange. I don't know if that's going to translate to all of our audience. In fact, I highly doubt it will. And to the point where I don't really recommend Rover Dangerfield to much of anybody. This isn't a versus episode. It's a double feature because the two do feature a really, really strong thematic link, but both have their moments of rather palpable horror. And I will make a strong argument, and it's the reason why we chose these for Childhood Nightmares Month. That's why the two films remain memorable today, is their use of horror, even though these are not horror films. And it's the same with Brave Little Toaster. This may not be a horror film, but its use of horror as a tool to tell the story is incredibly memorable and bold.
And overall, I think the movies that we did, it's always nice to see art that is trying to scare kids effectively or expose them to darker material with a sure hand. Like, I mean, that's the thing here, is that for as much as the quality varied throughout this month, I think there was a sure hand involved in all of these projects when it came to delivering the horror aspects, when it came to making something memorable that could scare kids or make an impression on kids. I think these movies, and Are You Afraid of the Dark as well, as a miniseries and television show, I think that it really succeeds at that. And I think Childhood Nightmares is something that, like other theme months, maybe we'll revisit because it's a broad enough topic.
Sure. Very deep well.
Yeah. So I'm glad we did that. That was a fun theme month. But let's, for the last time for Childhood Nightmares Month, head to the shelf where we pick some movies that might act as a good pairing or substitute for our main topic. And we encourage you to go to genrevision.com, comment on the post for this episode with your own shelf picks, and we'll feature them in next week's episode. Travis, what are you going to pull off the shelf for a Goofy movie and Rover Dangerfield?
My shelf pick this week is Gremlins 2.
Sure. I'll take any excuse to watch Gremlins 2 again.
This is a cartoon horror movie. Not because it's animated, but it's a fucking live action cartoon, and I beg anyone to fucking argue that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it opens with a Chuck Jones cartoon, with the whole Warner Brothers logo fight between Daffy and Bugs. This is the closest I think we've ever seen to a live action Looney Tunes film, and they made a live action Looney Tunes film, and Joe Dante directed it, which he also directed Gremlins 2, and he didn't even top himself from what he did in Gremlins 2. It's astounding work.
Yeah, I mean, I think ever since Key and Peele did that really incredible sketch about Gremlins 2 and just like how insanely, ridiculous it is, like they would include so many things. Like, yeah, I feel like there's been a sort of a cultural consensus on Gremlins 2 and how crazy it is, but we're not talking, I think, nearly enough about how stylistically bizarre it is as this strange hybrid of cartoon logic and cartoon physics with really mean-spirited horror. I mean, like Gremlins, the first Gremlins is quite mean-spirited as well, but Gremlins 2 is way more anarchic, and that kind of makes it darker. It really does feel meaner because it's not willing to play by any set of rules.
I think there's a lot that goes into that. The redesign of the Gremlins by Rick Baker makes them even more monstrous.
The effects in this movie are fucking incredible.
Oh, one of the best effects films ever made. He also made because in the original film, the Chris Walas designs, once they were Gremlins, they all pretty much looked the same. But Rick Baker was able to redesign them in a way where every Gremlin feels distinct.
Yeah, they became distinctly distinguishable characters. And not only did they have their shtick, like, every single Gremlin would have its individual traits. There is stuff like, just the way Joe Dante chose to shoot these effects really sets it apart from other effects films of the time, or really any time. There is a shot of 3 gremlin eggs sort of incubating in like a maintenance corridor or an air shaft or something like that. And one of them is the gremlin with the mohawk. and it's like this big saw blade mohawk that shoots out of the side of the cocoon with this incredible shing, and just the atmosphere of that is so well constructed, and the timing of it is beautiful. Fantastic editing, sound design, like it all adds up to a really incredible creature feature. But I really don't know if I've ever seen a creature feature that is as anarchic and as openly cruel about its cartoonery as Gremlins 2 is. I mean, being such a cartoon, it almost seems like a kid's film, but it's full of so many bizarre jokes and, you know, humor that would go over kids' heads. It's like, oh my God, this is kind of unbelievable. Like it ever came together. Like, it's like, who signed off on this? Like there's this whole weird joke about Zach Galligan's character and his boss, who has the hots for him, evidently, that they go to this Canadian restaurant, and it's like, what? Like, it's such a specific and strange joke. And the movie's full of that kind of stuff. It's just this bizarre specificity. Again,
it fits in with the Warner Brothers Looney Tunes cartoon logic of gag, of like, it's like you would just,
but the fucking, you know, if you've ever read the rules that they set out for like Wile E. Coyote versus the Roadrunner,
right?
Like they had a distinct set of, yeah, exactly. They had a distinct set of really, really strict rules. It's like the coyote can only be undone by his own actions, you know, and stuff like that. Like the really strict set of rules. Gremlins 2, almost fucking zero rules. They actually even question the rules at one point. They question the eat after midnight thing.
This is a lot more of a Tex Avery type
sure.
of cartoon than a Chuck Jones one.
Yeah.
No, yeah, Gremlins 2 is fantastic, and I support any reason to get more people to watch Gremlins 2. My shelf pick is actually, since you did the Warner Brothers movie, which is who distributed Rover Dangerfield, I will do the Disney movie, and this is DuckTales the movie, Treasure of the Lost Lamp from 1990, which was the other, I believe, the first feature film that the Disney's television animation department did. I have very fond memories of this movie, and I know I revisited it quite a few years ago, but as an adult, and I remember being, again, kind of like, this is solid. It's not great, but there's some really strange things in it, because DuckTales as a franchise is so brilliant, because it's one of the things that I kind of think about when I think about television series characters, is that it's more important for you to nail your characters in an ongoing series, because if you have good characters, you can kind of put them into any situation that you want, and if the characters are good, then it's just about finding fun and interesting ways for them to react to situations. And that's what DuckTales is like. DuckTales 1 week as a show could be a creepy horror episode where they're going to investigate some, you know, ancient Scottish castle. And then the next week it was like a sci-fi episode where they were building a robot.
Yeah, as long as your characters were clearly defined enough, you could literally put them in any situation and come up with a premise from there. I've probably seen this, but I literally have no memory of it.
Well, there's weird. So, I mean, this is a whole magical thing where there's an evil sorcerer played by Christopher Lloyd who's trying to get his hands on a magic lamp, which has a genie inside of it, which the Uncle Scrooge's nephews, Huey, Dewey, and Louie, unleash. The genie is played by Rip Taylor, which is absolutely wonderful. The sorcerer played by Christopher Lloyd can like shapeshift into, like, there's a whole sequence where he's like a cockroach and trying to like run along and eavesdrop on people or something. It's a wackadoo movie. But a very fun one, and another one that it's like it's cool to see other facets of Disney making movies where it's clear that they don't have the same edicts as some of the other feature films had. Mm-hmm. That they had a little more leeway to do certain things or to experiment in certain ways. And DuckTales Treasure of the Lost Lamp, I think for the most part, it holds up from my memory. I'd like to see it again to kind of re-gauge and see what I remember. But I remember it's like, yeah, I remember it not being that bad. So if anybody out there has seen it and has an opinion on it, please, leave it in the comments section. But now we do have to do our listener shelf picks from last week's episode on Are You Afraid of the Dark? And we had Eric Fuchs with Courage the Cowardly Dog and Carnival of Souls, the original film. Great picks. Tales from the Crypt presents Demon Knight and The Gate. Mr. Milksteak had Trick or Treat, or the Michael Dougherty Trick or Treat, and Tigers Are Not Afraid. And Stephen Nesbella's pick was Stranger Things for some good entry horror. And DT Grizzler went with an episode of the 80s Twilight Zone called The Shadow Man, which was directed by Joe Dante. I've seen this episode. I've actually seen the 80s Twilight Zone, and I know which one DT Grizzler is talking about. It's a good episode. So thank you, everybody, for your shelf picks. We love seeing those every week and look forward to the ones for this episode. Let's do some currently consuming.
Nom, 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 nom.
And Travis, I actually know we're both going to talk about the same thing. We saw a documentary called Class Action Park.
Yep, this is new and exclusive to HBO Max. It is all about a New Jersey. It wasn't exclusively a water park, but it was like half water park, half like
it's a theme park. It's an amusement park.
It was, but like half of it was like water park. The other half was like vehicular stuff. The sort of a Grand Prix racetrack sort of thing. And
yeah, they had go-karts and the infamous ride there, the Alpine Slide, which is basically just a concrete slide that people went down in these little plastic carts on. Yes, this is based around the infamous attraction Action Park, which was in New Jersey. And this is a very good job. It's a documentary I've been waiting years for and have been kind of following it. And it's a fascinating look at, I think, unbridled American capitalism and kind of the mad vision of a perfect American capitalist. Mm-hmm. Like you'd said to me, you were like, okay, so this is basically BioShock. And I knew what you were getting at when you said, it's like, oh yeah, one crazy person wanted to make their own little utopia. And in this one, it's a capitalist one.
Yeah, well, and something that they sort of push home in this documentary is that like often these capitalist or like libertarian utopias often reflect their creator. And that's usually a man, a man with some sort of scheme. Like evidently this guy had a bunch of like weirdo criminal connections and just generally just not a good guy. This guy named Gene Mulvihill. And he eventually came up with a scheme that the park would be insured by a fake insurance company that he invented. Like crazy.
It's an absolutely crazy story. And they talked to some people who worked at the park and attended the park. And you hear, all these kind of stories, which is what I had always heard about. It's like, oh yeah, there's all these accidents and people getting hurt. And the most interesting parts of the documentary for me were when they had footage from some of the employees at the time who are having parties and being crazy because they're all teenagers, and showing kind of, I like the idea of the culture that was developed in this one little place. Like that aspect of the documentary is really interesting to me, and how people, this was a thing that people knew. They talked about kind of the history of this place being like, look, it was the only water park close to New York, New York City. And so if you weren't rich and you weren't, spending summers in Cape Cod or going down to Florida or something, Action Park was your summer.
The opening, I would say 25 to 30 minutes of this documentary is flat out incredible. Hilariously funny. I mean, the interviews they managed to get with people who worked there are really great. But one of my favorite interviews, probably my favorite interview that they do manage to get, is comedian Chris Gethard. And his commentary about it as a kid, like who actually grew up around that area and did end up going to Action Park, his commentary is fucking hilarious. I mean, that had me like in stitches. It was so funny. And the documentary's eventual turn from like remembering this place as this bizarre, quirky, kooky piece of 90s nostalgia, and then turning it into the actual reality of what this place really was, is, I think, executed well, but it is nevertheless like a sharp slap. But it's intended to be.
No, yeah, and I think that functions well enough. I think the documentary is good. It's solid. It gives you what you want, which is that, I want to hear as many stories about this place as they can possibly dredge up. And then at the end, like, yes, here are the ramifications of, the different injuries and multiple deaths that happened. at this park.
And the whole overriding idea was like, well, it was their freedom to go out and die.
Sure.
Which is fucking insane.
Feels very echoing of...
I mean, it's a particularly strange sentiment, to echo now in the era of COVID, where the overriding, capitalist mentality is like, well, we're not going to impinge upon your freedom, so it is your freedom to go out there and get COVID and die for the economy.
So, yay. No, I think Class Action, just as a documentary, I think it's very accessible, the way it's presented and structured. I'd recommend it to anybody who has even a passing knowledge about Action Park, or that sounds interesting to hear about this kind of legendarily dangerous amusement park. I was glad that they kind of broke down all of, or as many of these specific rides as they could. I really liked that.
Oh, that section in the beginning about the looping water slide. I mean, I was like doubled over with laughter when they were talking about like testing it out on all these like stupid people without engineering degrees trying to devise how this slide would work. And like when they were paying kids $100 to like test it out for them, and they were finding like teeth embedded in the foam. Oh my God.
It's nuts.
Horrifying. But the way that they present it is like devastatingly funny.
It's good stuff. Yeah. A very solid documentary for the year. But let's close things out with our
comment of the week.
We're keeping things very, very simple this week. JT's shelf pick of Demon Knight prompted the response from Eric Fuchs. Demon Knight fucking rules. And honestly, yeah.
If you've never seen Tales from the Crypt Presents Demon Knight, please see Tales from the Crypt Presents Demon Knight.
Because as Eric Fuchs states, it assuredly fucking rules.
Yeah, it's a great movie.
Great. One of the best horror movies in the 90s, and just a great movie all around. So yeah, that is going to close out Childhood Nightmares Month. Next month, we're doing something that's, I think, going to be a little out of our wheelhouse. Next week, we will be reviewing Bill and Ted Face the Music. It just came out on VOD this weekend as we're recording this, and we wanted to give people some time to check it out, to let the opinions kind of sit, and then we're going to cover it on the show. But this is going to be part of, I think, what we're calling Screwy September, where we're going to try and do a bunch of comedies. Originally with Bill and Ted, we were like, time travel, we'll do a time travel month. But instead, we wanted to do kind of crazier movies because we have some pretty nutty movies on the docket. But we will be starting that off with Bill and Ted Face the Music next week. So come back to check that out. And as always, we want to thank you so much for listening. I'm Drew Deitch.
I'm Travis Newton.
And we'll see you next week.
Right here on Genre Vision.